In any rational world, today would be a horrible day for the Secretary of Defense. There are two major and very serious scandals surrounding it, because this isn't about using a jet to go see your girlfriend. This is about potentially illegal orders and risking security of our troops. Defense Department's Inspector General has released an 84-page report about the pending military strike and talking about it in texts with several colleagues and his wife. Now, Pete Hegseth's position is total exoneration. That's what he's claiming. I mean, this is just, it's the same playbook, right? Which is pretend you won when you lost. Pretend your opponents do what you do and suggest that that's the problem. According to the report, the information that was on Signal had been classified as secret / no foreign, which means it was not releasable to foreign nationals. And I'm going to read you from the report, so there's no ambiguity. The Secretary sent information identifying the quantity and strike times of manned U.S. aircraft over hostile territory over an unapproved, unsecure network approximately 2 to 4 hours before the execution of those strikes. Although the Secretary wrote in his July 25th statement, Inspector General, that there were, quote, no details that would endanger our troops or the mission, if this information had fallen into the hands of U.S. adversaries, Houthi forces might have been able to counter U.S. forces or reposition personnel and assets to avoid planned U.S. strikes. Even though these events did not occur, the Secretary's actions created a risk to operational security that could have resulted in failed U.S. mission objectives and potential harm to U.S. pilots. That is what Pence is claiming is a total exoneration. Now, remember, one of the issues is that Hegseth has broad authority to declassify information. And in a letter to the Inspector General, he apparently said that he used only, quote, non-specific general details and that he thought he could declassify. He said, quote, there was nothing classified in this text. The IG's recommendation on this is that the military sort of review its procedures. That's the party saying, well, they're not recommending anything terrible about me. Let me read you a little bit more, some other tidbits from the report. It notes that Hegseth frequently relied on his Signal account on his personal phone to coordinate meetings and send work directives. The March 15th messages that he sent about the pending strike were sent. His Signal account then sent the information to 19 people, including a reporter. Just imagine for a moment if this was Joe Biden's Secretary of Defense. How ballistic the right would be going about this. He used his personal phone from his house in Fort McNair, where he's already set up to transmit classified information using a different system. Many of the messages auto-deleted because of Pentagon investigators, quote, had to rely in part on the transcript posted by The Atlantic because he'd invited a reporter to join. Hegseth declined to give investigators access to the phone, citing privacy concerns. The report notes that they believe there are other chats, including those with non-DOD personnel with potentially sensitive information that investigators. Look, this makes what Hillary Clinton small. And I was very critical of Hillary Clinton using a personal server in her basement. And I criticized do anything wrong. Of course she did. But she was just trying to avoid FOIA, right? Freedom of information. And in the end, there is nothing to indicate that Hillary Clinton was sharing anything like the sensitivity of this kind of information, particularly among 19 people, including a reporter. You know, that's why the hypocrisy around this is just astonishing. But look, not everyone is hypocritical. There are Republican senators and members of Congress who are saying that this matters. For 28 last night on CNN, responding to Hegseth calling this an exoneration.
No one can rationalize that as an exoneration. We know that mission information was outside of the classified setting that it was trusted to be in. And, Caitlin, I don't even bring a pen into a classified briefing. We obviously don't have our phones. We don't have our watches. I don't even bring a pen in to make notes, to remove any doubt that there is something that I could have dropped or put in the trash can that I forgot about, because that's how seriously you need to take classified information. Thank God nothing bad happened. Thank God the great decision that the president made to make that strike was successful, but it could have put it at risk. And why would you send the signal that maybe this is okay? Maybe exonerate it by leaking information before a critical mission. Just let's move past it.
Well, let's accept responsibility for it and say, I made a mistake. I wouldn't do it again. It's horrible. But again, this is what happens when you get amateurs like Hegseth, like Kash Patel in these positions. You get amateur hour. So I don't think there was ill intent on his part. It's just wildly negligent and even reckless. But, look, it's good to see that Tillis isn't running for re-election, right? So he's got a little bit more freedom as a Republican to say what he wants. Because, man, you go off script with this team and you're going to be in trouble. We know that, right? But there's the other issue, which is probably more significant. And why do I say it's more significant? Because here there were real life implications. That one is theoretical. That one is protocol. Can hopefully learn lessons from it and not do it again. But the boat strikes obviously are not theoretical. They happen. And you've got now a number of Republicans saying that they think it's concerning. And again, it's not about whether you support fighting drug cartels. It's about how you did it and is it legal? By the way, before I get there, let me just say, I missed this one. Speaker Johnson gave the answer when he was asked about the Signal report. He gave the answer he gives every time he doesn't want to address something. This is number 34.
The Signal Gate IG report. Do you have any concerns about that?
Yes. I haven't seen it yet. Not familiar with it. Yeah. Anyway, but coming back to the issue, there is not a single legal mind who I have even a modicum of respect for who has suggested that somehow it is legal. Now, the new explanation from the administration is that these two guys survived. They got back in the boat. They were calling for help. And the concern was they were still in the fight, right? Because maybe they were calling to come pick up more drugs or they're calling for back. When it gets hit, the standard can't be if they call for help because they're the two survivors of a bomb that just hit the boat, that calling for help means they're still in the game, because then it doesn't mean anything to be shipwrecked. You could always make the argument that any enemy combatant, someone in war who survives an attack and calls for help is still in the fight. That's not the way the law works. But in the upside down world we are living in, there are some who want to tell us, including Pete Hegseth, including the president, that, oh yeah, it's all legal. This is Senator Tom Cotton just held a press conference to sort of defend Hegseth and Earl Bradley, who, by the way, is speaking to members of Congress behind closed doors today. Here is Senator Cotton.
This was witnessed by literally hundreds of uniformed and civilian personnel at the Pentagon, at Fort Bragg, at other installations. Dozens of them were lawyers. Everybody was watching. Everybody had seen the intelligence and the legal basis leading up to these strikes. Everyone was present during it, and that continues to be the case. There's been no change in the guidance or the order that the Secretary has given to our troopers. And in subsequent strikes, there's an example where survivors actually were shipwrecked and distressed and not trying to continue on their mission. And they were treated, as they should be, as non-combatants. They were picked up by U.S. forces. Just an example of how, of course, our military always obeys the laws of war. Our military also acts within appropriate lawful authority to target these narco-terrorists.
It doesn't always anything. It does in the vast majority of cases. And by the way, Admiral Bradley, the guy who is at the center of this, who apparently issued the order, very well-respected guy. Let me be clear. This is not partisan. This is a guy who has worked his way through the military. And, you know, it'll be interesting. We're not going to get to see what he says it, but, you know, I'm not going to just ignore what he has to say. I mean, I would be very interested in his explanation for why he did what he did. But you have Republicans now being very careful, but starting to talk about this being a concern. This is top Republican, number 14. This is from today on MS Now.
There's very much concerns where we all go back to the issue of the intelligence and what intelligence is being used. What do we really know about these individuals? What do we know about this cargo? What do we know about the communications that here? And quite frankly, many members have very much concerns as to whether or not the accuracy of what information is being used is to the level for us to even know what's happening in this area. And members are very concerned.
I mean, from a legal perspective, they should be. Again, that's a completely separate issue from whether it's a good idea to go after drug cartels. Question is, how? What is legal? What is not? And this seems to be when Pete hanging his finger at the media, basically saying, you don't understand it's like to be in the military. Well, there's a reason that, you know, for example, I had a former JAG judge on the show a couple days ago explaining to us why there's not even an argument as to how this is legal. So it's not, you know, this idea that, oh, he's served and therefore anything he says goes. This was part of his explanation.
I did not personally see survivors, but I stand because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire or smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war.
No, this isn't the fog of war. The fog of war is when there are decisions made on the battlefield, which we try not to second guess because it's not easy to make rational decisions all the time. This is a bunch of people sitting in an office watching videos of this, watching what the response is, watching two people survive, I guess watching them call for help, and then making a decision to send in another missile. That's not fog of war. And the idea that, oh, well, you know, Dan, you haven't served, so how can you say that? Because as a legal matter, it's obvious that that's not true. Again, I love it when people suggest, oh, you haven't served in the military, so you can't discuss the legal issues the way that someone who has can. Again, it's like saying, I don't do drugs, so I can't talk about drug policy because I'm not a regular drug user. So I don't know really what's going on with drugs. It's nonsense. And the good thing is, that, you know, on this one, there are Republicans who are seeing through it. This is Senator Rand Paul. This is a couple days ago. This is number 32.
In this sense, it looks to me like they're trying to pin the blame on somebody else and not them. There's a very distinct statement that was said on Sunday. Secretary Hegseth said he had no knowledge of this and it did not happen. It was fake news. It didn't happen. And then the next day from the podium with the White House are saying it did happen. So either he was lying to us on Sunday or he's incompetent and didn't know it had happened. Do we think there's any chance that on
4 seconds
the Secretary of the Defense did not know there had been a second strike?
And then there's Tom Tillis. Again, this is going to be number 29. Again, this is last night. We now know there was a second strike. That's not up for. He's sort of suggesting, you know, if there was a second strike, and Admiral Bradley's testifying about it today. But here's number 29.
Anyone who knowingly took on a disabled vessel, you learn that the responsibility a boater has, if you're a recreational boater, to actually come to the aid of a distressed vessel if it doesn't pose a threat to you. Minimally, you should have at least followed through by there to apprehend them. If someone knowingly launched a second missile at that boat, which led to the deaths of the other two, then they have to be held accountable and they shouldn't be in whatever role.
That's what happened. I mean, that's what happened. So let's see if there's going to be accountability on that.